Hello again, everybody, and welcome back. Before I begin talking about the Waldensians today, just a note about these videos in general. I teach here from a historical point of view, and I'm not promoting any particular spiritual path or religion. And so I hope that they are informative as history for you. And that's why I include not only their history, but some of their beliefs and philosophies. But I respect each person's right, certainly, to develop their own spiritual path and follow whatever religion they choose. As you look at these videos, you'll see the groups we talk about are quite diverse. They have a huge variety of beliefs, come from different centuries, and hold different ideas and developed in different ways. Some of them are Christian groups, but we'll also be talking about many that are not. If you also will take a look at the rest of this site, you'll see other playlists. There are some book studies about spirituality or ways of being spiritual that come from webinars that I've done in the past. There's also a playlist called Mystic Minds that explores the teachings of many of the famous Christian mystics. So I hope you'll check those out too, and I hope you enjoy them. The group we're talking about today are the Waldensians. The Waldensians are a proto-Protestant Reformation church. In other words, the Reformation happened in the 16th century, but many of the beliefs that had already been accepted by the Waldensians in the 12th century are very similar to those that we find coming forth in the Reformation. The Waldensians were originally called the Poor Men of Lyon. They're located primarily in France and in parts of Italy. So let's explore them a bit more. The founder of the Waldensians was a man named Peter Waldo. He was a wealthy merchant, and in about the year 1173, he gave away his property and began teaching voluntary poverty. He led an ascetic lifestyle and wanted people to follow closely his interpretation of the lifestyle that he saw in the Holy Writings. Now, most of our information about the early Waldensians, the ones from the 12th century and thereabouts, is from the Roman Catholic records and also their writings, which were against Waldensians. These are the people who declared them heretics, and so we can only presume that their writing about them may be somewhat biased. The movement was characterized by lay preaching, by voluntary poverty, and by strict adherence to their literal reading of the Bible. Early Waldensian preachers were divided into three categories. The first one is Sandaliati. I'm afraid my French and Italian is not very good, but these were ordained um, preachers, and their primary purpose was to defend the faith against the heretics. The second level were the doctores, and these were trained missionaries. And the third were the novellani, and they preached to the general population. In 1179, Waldo's ideas were condemned, but not the movement itself. And so the leader and the members were not excommunicated at that time, but he was asked to stop preaching because there were certainly differences between the Roman Catholic teachings and his. But this was a short-lived time. By the early 1180s, just a few years later, Waldo and his followers were declared heretics. They were excommunicated and they were forced to leave Lyon. Pope Innocent III in 1215 declared them heretics. In 1211, just prior to that, 80 Waldensians were burned to death in Strasbourg, and then follow several centuries of extreme persecution. In 1487, Pope Innocent VIII issued a bull for the extermination of this heresy. And as this extermination progressed, Charles I, who was the Duke of Savoy, decided to defend the Waldensians, and he promised them peace. And then in 1491, the theologian Angelo Carletti di Chivasso was involved in making a peace, sort of like a peace treaty between the Waldensians and the Catholic Church. Now, when news of the Reformation reached the Waldensians, they looked at their teachings and their beliefs and saw great similarities and actually joined the Reformed branch of the Reformation movement. But persecution arose again in the 17th century. In 1655, the Duke of Savoy attempted to again exterminate this sect. In January, the Duke ordered them to either attend Roman Catholic Mass or to leave the area. He said they could move into the Upper Valley regions where there were other members of their sect. And for some reason, he thought that they would choose to renounce their faith, but they didn't, and they chose to leave. Enraged, he sent soldiers to massacre them all. And on the 24th of April at 4 a.m., the signal was given for a general massacre of all these people in the Upper Valley regions. And the Duke's forces did not simply slaughter them, but they unleashed an unprovoked campaign of looting and rape, torture, and murder. What happened was so terrible, I have trouble even reading it. But victims were dismembered, burned, crushed to death, flayed alive, buried alive. Some were put on the ground and then just as you would plow in manure into the soil, they were plowed into the soil. Others were tied up and then had their hearts cut from their live bodies. Old people, sick and infirm people, children, they all received the same treatment. The massacre became known as the Piedmont Easter. Now, interspersed in these periods of persecution were sometimes periods of respite. In the Piedmont area, 5 decades, there was a respite there because so many people from around the known world, around the European world, were outraged by what had happened and offered some places where the surviving Waldensians could retreat to. There was some time of respite. But 5 decades after this Piedmont Easter massacre, the new Duke, on the 31st of January, 1686, declared all their churches should be burned, and all the Waldensians were to either renounce their false religion or receive the death penalty. They put up some resistance, but only for about 6 weeks. And at the end of that time, 2,000 Waldensians had been killed in fighting. Another 2,000 had given up and renounced their faith and joined the Roman Catholic Church, and some 8,000 were imprisoned, and more than half of those would die of starvation and illness while being imprisoned within a 6-month period. On the 3rd of January, 1687, the Duke required that the Waldensians leave the area immediately, or again, their choice was convert to the Roman Catholic Church. Some 2,800 left, headed for Geneva, and on the journey, approximately 400 of those died. 2,400 and something actually made it to Geneva. Wasn't till finally after the French Revolution that the Waldensians were assured that they could have liberty of conscience and civil rights. And from this point on, the Waldensians emigrated to distant areas of the world, different lands, where their faith still survives today. For those of us in the US, there are Waldensian churches in the United States even today. And now this is important. In 2015, after a historic visit to a Waldensian temple in Turin, Pope Francis, in the name of the Catholic Church, asked the Waldensian Christians for forgiveness for their persecution. And the Pope apologized for the unchristian and even inhumane positions and actions of the Church. Well, I hope you enjoyed that information about the Waldensians. Like many groups that were declared heretical as they began, they struggled much against the Orthodox churches of the times that had much more power than they did. I hope that you'll consider subscribing and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Perhaps share it with someone you think would be interested in this topic. And I hope that you guys will join with me next week when we look at another interesting group and learn about the beginnings of our spirituality. As always, leave your comments and questions, and I'll do my very best to answer them. I appreciate your support, and I really enjoy making these videos, and I hope they are informing your spiritual walk today. Have a good week, and I'll see you soon.